Suddenly, about 1 o'clock, the enemy opened upon us with a cannonade such as has seldom been heard on this continent. The very earth seemed to tremble beneath the ceaseless and tremendous explosions. For nearly 2 hours, more than 120 Confederate guns hurled destruction upon our lines. Shells burst above, behind, and among us, while solid shot plowed through our ranks and tore the trees and fences to fragments. Our own batteries replied, thundering defiance back across the fields. But even the bravest men felt a strange chill in their hearts during that awful storm of iron. Then as the smoke drifted away and the cannonade slackened, we saw them. Long gray lines of infantry emerging from the woods beyond the Emmitsburg road. They came on steadily, their battle flags fluttering above the haze, their bayonets glinting like a field of steel. It was a sight both terrible and magnificent. On they came, line after line, in perfect order, as though on parade, the ground trembling beneath their tread. The rebel yell rose and fell along their ranks, fierce, wild, and unearthly. Our guns opened with canister, tearing gaps in their lines, yet still they closed up and came on. The men of Pickett's division advanced directly upon our front, Kemper and Garnett leading with gallantry that was doomed to destruction. Pettigrew and Trimble came upon our left, their ranks swept by the fire of Webb's brigade and the guns of the Second Corps. When they reached the fence along the Emmitsburg road, their formations wavered under our fire, but rallied again and pressed forward, shouting like madmen. A portion of Armistead's brigade broke through the angle in our line near the copse of trees, that fatal clump which has since been called the high-water mark of the Confederacy. I saw General Armistead himself leap over our guns, waving his hat upon his sword and calling his men to follow. For a moment it seemed as though the tide of battle would break our line. But then our infantry rose from behind the stone wall and delivered a volley at point-blank range. Armistead fell, mortally wounded, and his men went down by scores. The Confederate flag that had been planted among our guns fell into our hands, and the gray tide began to recede, broken and shattered. In 15 minutes, all that was left of Pickett's magnificent division was streaming back across the field, leaving thousands of dead and dying upon the ground. The field between the lines was strewn with bodies, the grass red with blood. I had seen hard fighting before, but never such slaughter. The glory of that charge was its own destruction. When the smoke cleared, the cry of victory rose along our line. Gettysburg was won, and with it perhaps the war itself.
The plan for the third day was bold, and at the time I believed it could succeed. We were to open with every gun we had and drive the enemy's artillery from his ridge. Then Pickett, Pettigrew, and Trimble would advance across the open ground and finish the work. About 1 o'clock, our guns, more than 150 of them, opened fire almost at once. The noise was tremendous, shaking the very earth. The smoke rolled up like thunderclouds, and for nearly 2 hours we poured shot and shell upon the Federal line. It was the grandest cannonade I ever saw. But as the minutes passed, I began to notice that our fire was not silencing their guns. Their return fire came steadily, accurate, and strong. Our ammunition wagons were running low. I sent word to General Longstreet that we could not maintain such fire much longer. Then came Pickett, galloping up, splendid in his bearing, his long hair flowing, asking if the time had come. I told him that the infantry must go now, or not at all, that the ammunition was nearly gone and the opportunity slipping away. I watched as the 3 divisions formed their lines, Pickett on the right, Pettigrew in the center, Trimble on the left. They advanced with perfect order, their flags waving bright against the blue sky. It was a sight never to be forgotten, as grand as any in all the war. But when they reached halfway, the Federal batteries opened with a storm of canister. The air seemed filled with flying iron. Whole ranks went down at once, yet still they came on. The smoke thickened so that I could barely see the lines, but through the haze I could make out the bright flashes of musketry from the stone wall. The enemy's fire was murderous. It cut our ranks to pieces. Some of Pickett's men reached the wall. I saw their flags planted there, and for a moment it seemed they might carry the day. But the next instant, the whole crest blazed with musketry, and they were gone. The line melted away as though a giant scythe had passed through it. I rode forward a short distance and met Pickett himself. His face was pale as death. He said, "General Lee expects me to take that ridge." I could only answer, "General, you must look to your division. It is gone." And so it was. Of the 15,000 men who went forward, more than half were dead or wounded. The field was strewn with their bodies, the bravest men of Virginia and the South lying there in rows where they fell. I felt then that the battle, and perhaps the Confederacy, was lost. It was the bitterest hour of my life.
The order was given, and we stepped forward into that awful field. Never shall I forget the sight. Before us lay nearly a mile of open ground, and beyond it, the long, dark crest of Cemetery Ridge bristling with cannon and men. The sun shone bright and hot, and the air was still, save for the moan of the wounded left from the morning's fight. Our line dressed as if on parade. The men calm, steady, silent. On either side of me I saw faces pale but resolute. General Pickett rode before us, his hair streaming in the wind, calling to us to remember Virginia and our cause. Then we moved out. For the first few hundred yards, not a shot was fired. The enemy's line seemed asleep. But when we reached the Emmitsburg road, the world seemed suddenly to explode. The Federal guns opened with a roar that shook the ground. Shells burst over us, among us, before and behind. Men were torn to pieces. Whole files disappeared in an instant. Still we went on. Our line was no longer even. Men stumbled over the bodies of the fallen. Flags dipped and rose again as the color bearers were struck down and others seized them. The fire grew hotter. Canister now, at close range. I saw comrades I had known since Manassas fall like grass before the scythe. The air was filled with flying iron and splinters of fence rails. We reached the road and clambered over the broken fence, stepping on the bodies of the dead and dying. Beyond the road we could see the blue line behind the stone wall, their muskets flashing like lightning. We tried to rush them, shouting with all our strength, but our line was too thin. The ground before the wall was covered with gray and butternut, the bravest men I ever knew lying where they fell. I remember seeing General Armistead ahead of us, waving his hat on the point of his sword, crying, "Come on, boys! Give them the cold steel!" He reached the wall, leapt over, and for a moment it seemed that victory was ours, but then a sheet of flame burst from the Union line, and he went down mortally struck. We could go no farther. There were too few of us left. We fell back, some crawling, some walking, others carried by their comrades. The air was thick with smoke and dust, and the cries of the wounded. When I looked back from the shelter of a small rise, the field we had crossed was covered with our dead Virginians, Carolinians, Tennesseans, lying in long windrows as if mown by some terrible hand. Never before or since have I seen such slaughter. Of our regiment, scarce a handful came back unhurt. The charge was over, and the pride of Pickett's division was gone forever.